My name is Claire Grayson, and I lost my daughter because of a lie my own mother told. Haley was dragged away in the middle of the night, accused of something she didn't do. But if they thought I'd stay quiet, they don't know what a mother will do for her child. Where are you watching this video from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. You never expect the worst news of your life to come dressed in static and silence. It was 2:13 in the morning when my hotel room phone buzzed, a shrill, cruel noise that carved through my sleep like a blade. My first thought was Haley, mother's instinct, that old whisper we never shake off. I fumbled for the phone, knocking over the lamp, heart already pounding. "Mom!" Her voice was tight, breathy. She was crying. "I'm at the police station in Wilmington. Grandma said I hit her. I swear I didn't touch her." "What?" I sat up so fast the sheets tangled around my legs. "Haley, what are you talking about? Where are you exactly? Who's with you?" I heard a calm voice cut in, male, professional. "Ma'am, your daughter is being held for questioning. You'll need to come down." Held. That word, it clamped around my chest like a vice. I didn't even think. I grabbed my laptop, shoved it in my tote, stuffed toiletries into my purse, and slipped on the same jeans I'd worn the day before. I was in New York for work, a client meeting that suddenly meant nothing. Wilmington, Delaware was 2 hours south. I hit the road with nothing but a hoodie, a prayer, and a rising panic that tasted like metal in my mouth. The highway was empty, just streaks of red tail lights and the hollow rumble of tires against blacktop. Every few miles, I replayed Haley's voice in my head, high-pitched, broken, terrified. "Grandma said I hit her." Impossible. Haley is 17, artistic, quiet. She still colors in the margins of her notebooks. She says sorry when someone bumps into her. My daughter doesn't raise her voice, let alone her hands. Something was wrong. Deeply, grotesquely wrong. I thought of my parents, Linda and Richard, the kind of couple that made their neighbors feel inferior just by existing. My mother, the queen of performative perfection. My father, silent unless he's delivering judgment. I hadn't spoken to them in weeks, and even then it was stiff, strained. Now Haley was in a police station because of them. The moment I pulled into the precinct's lot, dawn was a faint blue whisper on the horizon. My hands trembled as I locked the car, heart still jackhammering behind my ribs. The inside smelled like bleach and resignation. "Claire Grayson," I told the woman behind the glass. "I'm here for my daughter, Haley." She buzzed me in. A long hallway, doors, and then I saw her. Sitting alone on a plastic chair, eyes red, cheeks blotchy, biting her lip like she was holding back a scream. She looked up. "Mom," she whispered. I crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into me. Her shoulders shook so hard I thought she might shatter. "She said I broke the window," Haley said into my neck. "But I didn't even go near the house until she called me in. Then her breath hitched. She slapped me, hard, then screamed that I attacked her." I couldn't even speak. Rage and confusion made a thunderstorm behind my eyes. Before I could respond, the door opened, and in walked my parents. Perfectly dressed, perfectly smug. Linda gave a small, performative gasp. "Claire, we didn't expect to see you so soon." I stood up slowly, body stiff as stone. "Why is my daughter here?" "She's violent," my mother said, folding her arms like she was wrapping herself in righteousness. "She's always been impulsive. You coddled her, Claire. You let her get away with too much." My father, standing like a statue behind her, added, "You've allowed her to disrespect authority for years." Haley flinched. I turned to them, voice low but razor-sharp. "You're lying." Linda tilted her head. "Are we?" I stepped between them and Haley. "She would never hit anyone, least of all you." My mother's smile faltered, just for a second. The officer cleared his throat. "We're reviewing the report. For now, she's not under arrest, but we can't release her until Child Protective Services reviews the situation." I froze. "CPS, are you saying you might take her away?" No one answered. That was when I knew. This wasn't just about a broken window or a slap. This was war. I didn't sleep. Not even a minute. By the time the sun stretched its pale fingers through the station's narrow windows, my nerves were shot and my hands ached from clenching and unclenching them all night. Haley had been allowed to rest in a side room, bare, gray, cold, but safe. I stayed planted in the waiting area like a guard dog, my eyes locked on every officer who passed. I'd already asked to see the report 3 times. They kept saying it's under review. At 6:45 a.m., they finally let me take her home. A temporary release, they called it. My parents were still there when we stepped out. My mother held her purse like it was something sacred, tapping her fingers against the leather. My father was a shadow, still and unreadable. "She needs help," Linda said quietly as we passed. "Real help, Claire." I didn't respond, just pulled Haley closer and walked. The drive back to our house in Philly was quiet. Haley kept her eyes on the road, head leaning against the window, every now and then wiping away a silent tear. I didn't push her, not yet. The truth needed space to come out on its own, not under pressure. Our home had never felt more sacred. I helped her inside, wrapped her in a blanket, and made her favorite hot cocoa with cinnamon just the way she liked it when she was 6. She cupped the mug like it was keeping her grounded. Only then did I ask, "Haley, tell me everything." She stared at the swirling cocoa for a long moment. Then in a small voice she said, "I went to drop off the care package you made for Grandma's recovery, after her surgery." I nodded. She was in the front yard, looked tense. She asked if I'd broken her kitchen window last week. Haley looked at me then, her lip trembling. I said no. I hadn't even been to the house in over a month, but she didn't believe me. I could feel my nails digging into the ceramic of my mug. She kept pressing, getting more and more angry. Then she said something like, "Don't play innocent, you've always been sneaky." I tried to walk away, Mom, I swear, and that's when her eyes welled, her voice cracked. She slapped me hard, I didn't even know what to say, I was stunned. And then she screamed loud like a performance. She yelled, "How dare you hit me?" Even though I was 3 feet away. She buried her face in her hands. "I didn't touch her, Mom, I didn't." My throat burned with fury and shame. "I believe you," I said immediately. "No one gets away with touching my daughter, no one." Haley let out a sound, half sob, half relief, and collapsed into my arms. We stayed there for a while. The ticking of the wall clock was the only sound besides her sniffling. Then I said something I hadn't planned. "I think this was on purpose." Haley blinked. "What do you mean?" "I think they wanted to provoke you, get a reaction, so they could twist it into something else." I paused. "Something that could make a legal case." Her eyes widened. "Like what?" "I don't know yet," I said quietly, "but I'm going to find out." The silence that followed was heavier than before. I wasn't just fighting for my daughter's name now. I was fighting to expose whatever cruel game my parents had started and make sure they regretted every piece of it. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and old fear. Haley had gone upstairs to shower, leaving her mug half full on the counter. I stared at it while the faucet ran overhead, my thoughts spiraling into dark corners. I had to be careful now. My parents had always been about appearances. The picture-perfect couple with matching windbreakers, tasteful garden statues, and polite cruelty stitched beneath every compliment. But this was something new and vile. They weren't just cruel, they were calculated. I sat at the table, turning over every memory like a forensic detective. I remembered how, when Haley was younger, they'd praise her art, then snicker later about her silly drawings. How they'd offer to babysit only to whisper about her oversensitivity when she cried at loud noises. It had always been subtle, just sharp enough to hurt, never sharp enough to accuse. But now they'd escalated from petty criticism to full-blown character assassination. Of a teenager. My teenager. I pulled my laptop from my tote and opened it with a snap. My inbox was flooded, missed calls, canceled meetings, reschedules, but I didn't care. I opened a blank document and titled it Timeline. Then I began to type, every detail Haley had told me, every piece of the puzzle. Grandma confronts Haley on October 14, 3:10 p.m., accuses her of breaking a window. Haley denies. Slap occurs. No witnesses. Grandma calls police, claims assault. I paused. There had to be a reason. A bigger reason than ego. I tried to remember the last time I'd spoken to my mother. It was over brunch months ago. I'd mentioned in passing that I was updating my will, something about naming Haley's godmother as guardian in case anything happened. My mother had smiled too tightly. "So not us then," she'd said. I had brushed it off. I didn't want Haley raised in that emotional landmine field. Now, looking back, that moment glowed red. Maybe this wasn't about a slap or a window. Maybe this was about control. Suddenly, my phone buzzed across the table. It was my boss, Michelle. I hadn't even called in yet. I hesitated, picked up. "Claire," she said, voice clipped. You missed both client pitches. We had to move forward without you. I swallowed hard. Michelle, I had an emergency, a legal one involving my daughter. I get it, she cut in. But this was a major account. We can't afford gaps right now. I stared out the window. So, am I fired? A pause. We'll talk Monday. But don't be surprised if your role shifts. Click. I let the phone fall to the table. Great. My daughter was nearly thrown into juvie over a lie, and now I was about to lose the job keeping our bills paid. As if on cue, a new email popped up. Subject: heard you might be available, need help. From Jenna Morales. I blinked. Jenna and I had worked together years ago, tech consultant on a banking app I'd developed UX for. She'd gone freelance full-time and was one of the sharpest minds I knew. Hey Claire, saw your company's site updated. You're not leading dev anymore. If you're open to side gigs, I've got a client needing quick turnaround on a Gov project. Good pay. Let me know. I exhaled, stunned. I typed back before I could overthink it. Yes, tell me more. For the first time in 2 days, I felt something crack through the chaos. A sliver of light. Not everything was falling apart. Not yet. I walked upstairs and found Haley curled up on her bed, hair wet, wrapped in her favorite fleece blanket. I sat down beside her. I'm filing a complaint, I said gently. And emotion, I'm going to get us legal control of this situation. You're not going back to their house. She looked at me, eyes red but alert. Will it work? I touched her cheek. It has to. Because if it didn't, I didn't know what kind of mother I was anymore. By morning, I had every document spread across my dining table like battle plans. Birth certificate, school reports, medical records, even Haley's old art contest ribbons, anything that might show who she truly was. Not the unstable child my mother wanted the world to believe in, but the gentle, thoughtful girl who made origami cranes during thunderstorms and fed the neighbor's cat when they were on vacation. I didn't know exactly what the court needed, but I was going to drown them in the truth. I started with the complaint. Filing it felt surreal, like signing my name to a war I never thought I'd fight. But the moment the clerk stamped the documents and handed me the copies, something shifted in my chest. Not peace. Not yet. But power. Back home, Haley watched from the couch as I paced with the phone cradled between my ear and shoulder, calling every legal office that hadn't been scooped up by my parents' wide reach. Most were too pricey. Some politely declined when they heard the names Linda and Richard Easton. But one woman, Ellen Kravitz, sounded different. Her voice had that warm bluntness of someone who'd seen too much and didn't care for pretense. Small firm, just me and an assistant, she said. But I've taken on families like yours before. I booked the consultation within seconds. Her office sat above a dry cleaner in a strip mall off Roosevelt Boulevard. The waiting room had mismatched chairs and a dying rubber plant. I loved it instantly. Ellen looked to be in her late 50s, curly gray bob, thick glasses, and a sharpness in her stare that reminded me of a hawk scanning for movement. I explained everything, Haley's version, the slap, the accusation, the CPS involvement. She took notes silently, tapping her pen against the yellow legal pad with rhythmic intensity. When I finished, she leaned back. Well, Claire, she said, you're not crazy. This stinks of manipulation. Relief flooded me so fast I almost cried right there. But, she added, we're going up against a family with influence. I know your father sat on the board of the Civic Oversight Committee. Your mother's been on PTA boards since the 90s. They know this system. I figured, I said, voice steady. And your sister's backing them? Ellen asked, raising a brow. I winced. Deborah's always been the obedient one. If my parents say the sky is orange, she'll point out the sunset. Ellen nodded. Then we play smarter. She outlined our approach. File for emergency custody protections, request the court appoint a neutral evaluator, and subpoena any medical or security reports from the day of the alleged incident. It was going to be slow, complicated, but not impossible. I don't promise wins, she said, closing her folder. But I fight hard, especially for women who have been gaslit by their own blood. That night, I told Haley the plan over dinner. She pushed her mashed potatoes around her plate. What if they say I'm lying again? Then we'll show them the truth louder, I said, her lips curved into a weak smile. That sounds like something you'd say in one of your old client pitches. Because it is, I grinned. Except this time my pitch is you." She reached across the table and took my hand. "Thanks, Mom." Something caught in my throat. "Always." As I cleaned up the plates later, I glanced at the family photos on the hallway wall. Most were just Haley and me, our birthdays, beach trips, science fairs. But one photo lingered from 5 years ago. Thanksgiving, my parents. Deborah, me smiling too wide. Haley small and quiet in front. I stared at that picture a long time. Then I took it down. And I didn't put it back. The courthouse smelled like old paper and nervous sweat. I sat stiffly in the cold pew-like bench, Haley's hand tucked in mine, while our attorney Ellen scribbled something onto her legal pad. She had that look again, sharp, surgical. I didn't ask what she was writing. I was too busy watching the enemy walk in. My parents arrived like royalty. My mother wore navy. Structured blazer, pearls, her concerned matriarch face perfectly in place. My father trailed behind, gray tie and silence, a walking statue of judgment. And behind them came Deborah. I froze. She wore a silk blouse and the smug confidence of someone who hadn't returned a single call or text in over a month. Haley's grip tightened. "She's testifying against me." I didn't answer. I couldn't lie, not today. We were seated in separate rows, but when my mother glanced back at us, her expression didn't waver. Not one flicker of doubt, just pure, cold resolve. The judge entered. The room stood. The dance began. Ellen opened with a clear, concise petition for emergency custody relief. The minor, Haley Grayson, is at risk of emotional trauma due to a false accusation. We request she remain in her mother's custody pending full investigation. Then the other side responded. Their attorney, a polished man with a square jaw and rehearsed empathy, stood slowly. "Your Honor, we have grave concerns about the child's well-being. Multiple adults, including her own aunt, will testify to increasingly erratic behavior. This isn't about punishment, it's about safety." I felt Haley shift beside me, her whole body recoiling. Then they called Deborah. I watched my sister swear under oath and take the stand like it was her stage debut. "She's always been volatile," Deborah said smoothly. "Even as a child, Haley had outbursts. I remember once she screamed at Grandma for not buying the cereal she liked. She threw the box across the kitchen. That had happened. Haley was 4. And last Christmas, she stormed out because she didn't get the bedroom she wanted. She'd left early because Grandpa made a comment about her weight. She's moody, dismissive. Honestly, I've worried for years, but no one listens when it's a teenager. Now there's finally proof." I gripped the edge of my bench so hard my knuckles turned white. Ellen stood for cross-examination, but the damage was done. The words volatile, proof, safety, they were seeds. And I could see them landing in the judge's furrowed brow. Then it was my turn to speak. I took the stand, my palms damp, my voice trembling at first. "My daughter is not perfect. She's 17. She cries during horror movies, makes collages on her ceiling, forgets to take the trash out. But she is kind, she is quiet, and she is not violent." I paused. "My mother slapped her, and then lied about it because Haley had the courage to say no." I locked eyes with the judge. "This isn't about a window or a slap. This is about control." The room was still. But when the ruling came, it was like a hammer through glass. "The court finds insufficient evidence at this time to overturn the emergency petition by the grandparents," the judge said. "Haley Grayson will be placed temporarily into protective custody pending further review." I couldn't breathe. Haley's hand slipped from mine. A bailiff approached her gently, asking her to stand. I rose in protest, but Ellen caught my arm. "Don't," she whispered. "Not here." My daughter looked back at me as they led her out. Her face didn't crumple. She didn't cry. She just looked betrayed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burn the whole courthouse down. But instead, I sat frozen as my parents exchanged the smallest glance behind me, a flicker of a smile. I sat on the park bench with my coat pulled tight, not against the wind, but against the grief. The courthouse was only 4 blocks away, but it felt like another world. Haley was gone, taken, like a chapter torn out mid-sentence. People strolled by with coffees and strollers, chatting, unaware that my entire world had just shattered under their feet. I opened my phone. I scrolled through the list, past coworkers, past Ellen, past Jenna's email thread. Then I stopped on a name I hadn't said out loud in years. Jack Grayson. My ex-husband. Retired Army intelligence. Tough, blunt, better with classified documents than emotions. We'd divorced when Haley was 10 after too many years of miscommunication and silence, but he'd stayed a polite, distant presence. Holidays, birthday cards, occasional summer visits, but now I needed someone who knew how to fight systems, who didn't flinch at pressure. I stared at his name, then I pressed call. It rang, twice, 3 times, then Claire. His voice was rougher than I remembered, sleepy or surprised. "It's Haley," I said. "I need you." A pause. "What happened?" "Not over the phone. Can you meet me?" Another beat. "Where?" We met at a diner off I-95, the kind with peeling menus and a waitress who called everyone hun. It was neutral ground. We hadn't shared coffee in 6 years. Jack walked in wearing a military jacket and that unreadable stare. Same squared shoulders, same wary posture. He sat across from me, ordered black coffee, then said, "Start from the beginning." I told him everything. From the 2:13 a.m. phone call to the slap to the courtroom betrayal. I kept my voice steady, but halfway through I felt tears coming. I turned away. He didn't say anything, just reached into his pocket and handed me a napkin. When I finished, he leaned back slowly, processing. "You think your parents orchestrated this?" "I know they did," I said. "They want control. Haley is their pawn and Deborah's playing along." Jack's jaw clenched, his hands folded tight. "Where is she now?" he asked. "In a CPS-run youth shelter, temporary holding. It's like a halfway house for kids they don't know what to do with." "Have you seen her?" "Not yet. I'm filing a visitation request." He nodded. "This is deeper than family drama. They're framing her, Claire, fabricating a behavioral pattern." "I know." He looked out the window. "They're using legacy, old reputation, networks. That's how they're moving this fast." I blinked. "You think it's coordinated?" "I've seen it before. You create a narrative, then support it with just enough credible voices to cast doubt. Like Deborah." He nodded. I stared at my chipped mug. "I tried playing fair. I tried telling the truth." Jack looked at me then, directly. "Then maybe it's time we stop playing fair." Something shifted between us. A silence, but not the awkward kind. The kind that sits on shared ground. "I've got people," he said. "Old contacts, private, quiet. They know how to dig where others don't. You'd help." He took a sip of his coffee, then set the cup down gently. "They're not going to get away with this." It wasn't a question. I didn't know whether I wanted to cry or hug him, so I just nodded. And for the first time in days, I felt something I hadn't dared feel. Hope. By Monday morning, Jack was already in motion. He had that military focus again, the kind I hadn't seen since we were newlyweds and he was prepping for his last deployment. Precise. Detached. Controlled fury funneled into action. He didn't ask permission. He just texted me 2 words, "Start digging." Ellen was cautiously optimistic. "It's not inadmissible to investigate, but anything Jack finds has to be airtight. You understand, we're dancing on razor wire." "I know," I said, "but we're out of time." She paused. "Why?" "Because I'd just gotten a call from Haley's caseworker." "Claire," the woman had said gently, "your daughter isn't adjusting. She's not eating much. She barely speaks. She's isolating." I'd asked to see her, begged. "Wednesday," she said. 1 hour monitored." Now it was Tuesday night and every hour felt like a month. I couldn't sleep. I paced the kitchen, answered emails I didn't remember typing, reread the court's decision as if maybe I'd missed a loophole. That's when Jack called. "I've got something." He sounded different, edged. "You might want to sit down." "I'm fine," I said, already gripping the back of a chair. "We pulled the timestamps from the police report," he said. "Cross-referenced them with the home security camera your parents have." My heart jumped. "They gave that footage to the police." "They gave edited footage," he replied. "But we got the original from the camera company. They still had backups on the cloud." I couldn't breathe. "There's a 7-minute gap," he continued. "Right at the time Haley said the confrontation happened." I sat down hard. "They deleted it." "Looks that way. Also, your mom made 2 phone calls before the police arrived. One to a Ms. Patterson at the Department of Child Welfare, another to Deborah, both before the alleged incident even took place." He let the silence stretch. "They were coordinating a report," I whispered. "Yep." I was too stunned to cry, too stunned to scream. "And that's not all," he added. "Deborah gave a written statement about Haley's behavior in school, but we checked with the principal. She never contacted them. Her account was fabricated. I covered my mouth. Jack's voice softened just a bit. We've got evidence of intent, fabrication, possibly even obstruction. Will it hold? That's Ellen's call, but I'll keep going. I nodded. Thank you. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you were right to call me, Claire. I didn't respond. I couldn't trust my voice. The shelter was a converted administrative building, low ceilings, locked doors, peeling paint. It looked more like a clinic than a home for children. I waited in the cold visiting room with plastic chairs and faded posters about resilience. A staff member stood by the door with a clipboard. You'll have 1 hour, keep it calm. Then the door opened. And there she was, Haley. Her face was thinner, eyes dull, hair pulled back like she didn't care anymore. She moved like a ghost, quiet, slow, arms wrapped around herself. Hi, I whispered. She sat across from me, not meeting my eyes. Are they treating you okay? I asked, a small shrug. Food, warm enough. Nodded, barely. I'm working on getting you out. We found some things, some proof. Another shrug. Haley, please talk to me. Her lip trembled. Then finally, why didn't you stop them? It hit me like a freight train. I tried, I said. I'm still trying. But you knew what they were like, she whispered, eyes wet now. You always knew, and you still let me go there. You still let them in our lives. I had no answer. She wasn't wrong. I'm so sorry, I said. I thought they'd changed. She finally looked at me. They didn't. I know that now, I whispered. And I swear to you I will never let them near you again. She blinked slowly. Promise. With everything I have. I reached for her hand. She hesitated, then took it. We sat like that, mother and daughter, in a room that reeked of institutional soap and silent suffering, just holding on. When the staffer came to get her, Haley stood slowly. Will I see you again soon? Sooner than you think, I said, and I meant it. Because this wasn't just about custody anymore. This was about justice. By Thursday, the dining table had become a war room. Jack stood over the evidence files he'd printed, his hands moving in precise gestures, linking timelines, highlighting inconsistencies. I watched him with a mixture of awe and exhaustion. Every time I blinked, I saw Haley's hollow eyes from the shelter visit. She was slipping away. We had to move faster. We've got gaps in the police report, Jack said, tapping the page. 2 officers claim to respond, but their dashcam footage doesn't match the call time. You mean they were never there? They were somewhere, he said, just not at your parents' house when they claimed, which means someone adjusted the logs after the fact. My stomach dropped. You think the police are in on it? I think someone's pulling favors. Could be a friend, a favor owed, maybe just old loyalty. But this isn't clean. He showed me screenshots, email headers from my mother's account, secured through legal discovery. One jumped out immediately. Subject: Haley's escalation pattern build documentation. My mouth went dry. She sent this before the slap, I whispered. Jack nodded grimly. They were planning to create a case long before Haley ever stepped onto their lawn. I looked at Ellen, who joined us that morning in sweats and a no-nonsense bun. Will this be enough? I asked. She hesitated. It's compelling. But unless we prove malice and misconduct from public servants, like CPS or law enforcement, it's not enough to overturn the ruling. But we have them lying. Yes, and we'll use it, but courts are slow to admit they were duped. It'll come down to one thing: do we have enough pressure to make them care? I pressed my fists into the table. What else can we give them? Jack's jaw tightened. Witnesses, someone from the inside. But everyone's on their side, I said bitterly. Even Deborah. Ellen leaned forward. That's not entirely true. I've been quietly reaching out. There's a former caseworker from Haley's school who flagged concerns about your parents' behavior years ago, says they dismissed her. My heart fluttered. She's willing to testify. She's considering, but she wants anonymity until we file a motion. That glimmer of hope returned, but flickered. Then Jack's phone buzzed. He stepped away, took the call in the hallway. I turned to Ellen. What if this doesn't work? She looked at me, truly looked. Then we appeal, we escalate. But Claire, this is going to get uglier before it gets better. Your family's not just fighting to win, they're fighting to bury you. She stood and grabbed her coat. Be ready. That night, as I folded laundry in silence, Jack stepped into the room with a different look on his face. What? I asked. He held up a printed transcript. Your mother's deposition from her church board hearing 3 years ago. She was investigated for misappropriating charitable funds. I blinked. She never mentioned that. She wouldn't. It was sealed after a settlement, but it was brought to the ethics committee. And guess who intervened on her behalf? Deborah, I guessed. He nodded. That bond runs deep. They're protecting each other. He handed me the transcript. There's leverage here. If your sister lied under oath to protect your mother once, we can raise questions about the current testimony. It wasn't a silver bullet, but it was something sharp enough to aim. I sat down, tired but resolute. Then Jack's tone shifted. There's something else. What? He sat beside me carefully. CPS called again. Haley, she's not speaking to staff at all. They're labeling her uncooperative. No, I stood up. That's not who she is. She's shutting down. Exactly, Jack said. And if they log her as resistant, it'll be used against her in the next hearing. My mind reeled. We have to get her out before they twist this any further, I said, even if it's just temporary custody again. Ellen called 5 minutes later. I just got the judge to agree to an emergency review. Tomorrow morning, bring everything. As I hung up, I whispered to myself, we're out of time. Jack looked at me. Then let's finish this. The second visit to the shelter didn't feel any easier. If anything, it was worse. The novelty of crisis had worn off, leaving only the heavy residue of injustice. The security guards barely glanced at me now. The intake clerk remembered my name. That stung more than it should have. The building felt colder this time, or maybe I was just more awake to how inhuman it all was. Everything here echoed, voices, footsteps, pain. You could tell it wasn't meant to be permanent, but some kids had clearly been here too long. You could see it in their eyes. They brought Haley in through a different hallway. She looked even thinner, pale, withdrawn. Her clothes hung a little looser on her frame. Her expression was blank, as if she'd folded herself into silence just to survive. She didn't rush into my arms. She didn't smile, but she sat. That was something. I didn't think they'd let me come back, I said gently. Haley stared down at the table between us. They said you had a temporary clearance. I fought for it. She shrugged. They said I don't cooperate. I know, they told me. I paused. I told them they're wrong. That got a flicker, barely a twitch at the corner of her mouth. I reached across the table, hand open, palm up, not forcing, just offering. After a long moment, she placed her hand in mine, still no words. They think this place will break you, I whispered. They think if they keep you quiet long enough, people will believe what they said about you. Haley's hand twitched, then held tighter. But I know you, Haley, and I will not let them define you by a lie. She finally looked at me. Her eyes shimmered, but no tears fell. She was past crying. That terrified me more than the tears ever did. I'm going back to court tomorrow, I said. We have new evidence, witnesses, paper trails, tampered reports. Her lips parted, then quietly, will it work? I hesitated. I don't know. She pulled her hand back slightly. But I'll never stop trying, I added. Even if we lose again, I'll fight harder. I'll make noise, I'll go to the press. I'll show up at every review board until someone listens, because no one gets to erase you, Haley. No one. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly. You're not what they say, I whispered. She looked down again, but this time she nodded. I brought you something, I said, pulling a folded paper from my bag. It's nothing special, just a sketch you left on the fridge. Remember that tree you drew in pencil? She blinked. The one with the swing. Yeah. I scanned it, printed a copy, thought maybe you'd want to see something that still feels like you. I slid the paper across the table. Haley picked it up gently, like it was something sacred. I loved that tree, she murmured. It made me feel safe. I smiled. Then think about that tree tomorrow. Think about who you are, not what they say, not what they wrote. She folded the paper carefully and tucked it into her sleeve like a secret. The staffer near the door cleared her throat. 2 minutes. I stood. I hug you. Haley stood too, slowly. Then she walked into my arms and held on tighter than she had in months. I'm so tired, she whispered. I know, I said, but hold on, just one more day. I think this one might be different. She nodded against my shoulder. Tell them I'm not giving up, she said softly. I will. We separated slowly, like something being peeled apart. She walked away without turning around. But this time, she took the drawing with her. The courthouse felt different this time. Not less intimidating, but charged, like the air before a storm. Jack stood beside me in the hallway outside the courtroom, his suit crisp, his eyes hard. He didn't fidget. He didn't blink too much. He was built for this kind of war, one fought with words, evidence, and tightly timed strategy. But I wasn't. I was just a mother, and my child had been taken. Ellen arrived 5 minutes before the hearing, flanked by her assistant, carrying a thick binder of motions and a quiet fire in her eyes. "Today's the day," she said simply. "Stay calm. Don't interrupt. Let them collapse under their own weight." Inside, the same judge presided. Same stiff posture. Same tendency to tap the bench when testimony ran long. My parents were already seated, my mother in beige this time, like mourning clothes for a lie she was about to bury. My father sat perfectly still, as always, playing the grieving patriarch. Deborah once again stood behind them. I didn't look away. Let them know I wasn't afraid anymore. Ellen began. "Your Honor, new evidence has surfaced suggesting fabrication, manipulation of state resources, and perjury. We submit a motion to reevaluate custody and open a formal investigation." The judge raised a brow. "That's a strong accusation, Counselor." "Yes, it is," she replied. "And we have the documents to back it up." She walked the court through everything, one step at a time. The timestamp gaps in the police report. The cloud-stored camera footage, clearly showing a deletion window matching the alleged assault. The internal emails between my mother and a child services liaison, sent before the incident, suggesting intent to fabricate behavioral patterns. The call logs that proved Deborah had been briefed before the event, despite testifying otherwise in court. The courtroom shifted. Subtle but real. My parents didn't move, but Deborah, she started fidgeting. One hand twisting the bracelet on her wrist, over and over. Classic tell. Then came the moment Ellen had been waiting for. "Your Honor, I'd like to call Deborah Easton to the stand for re-examination." Their lawyer objected. "She already testified." She testified under the assumption her statements were uninformed and independent. We now know they were coordinated and prompted by direct conversations with the plaintiffs. The judge allowed it. Deborah looked stunned, like someone just ripped the script out of her hands. She took the stand, hands folded tightly in her lap. Ellen's tone was calm, almost friendly. "Ms. Easton, were you aware of your mother's plan to contact CPS prior to the incident?" "No," Deborah said quickly. Ellen nodded. "And yet, here's the call log. You spoke for 18 minutes the day before the incident, at the exact time the email about documenting Haley's behavior was sent." I don't remember that call." Ellen raised an eyebrow. "So you don't remember a call, but you testified with very specific examples of behavior Haley allegedly showed." Deborah swallowed hard. "I was told," she paused. "I mean, my mother said—" "Ms. Easton," Ellen interrupted gently, "you're under oath. Did you fabricate or exaggerate claims about Haley to help your parents gain custody?" The silence was long. My heart beat so loudly I thought the bailiff might hear it. Then Deborah whispered, "Yes." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. My mother stood suddenly. "Deborah!" The judge banged his gavel. "Order!" Deborah burst into tears. "I didn't think it would go this far. I thought they just wanted to scare Claire into agreeing to oversight." The judge called for recess. Everything dissolved into noise. Jack turned to me, eyes narrowed. "It's happening." I nodded, speechless. Outside the courtroom, I caught a moment with Deborah. She looked wrecked, makeup streaked, hands trembling. "I didn't want her hurt," she said. I always do what they say." I looked at her for a long, cold moment. "Then maybe it's time you start thinking for yourself." She didn't answer. Inside, the judge called us back. "We will reconvene tomorrow to issue a ruling based on this new testimony and evidence. Until then, the child will remain in temporary custody." It wasn't the win yet, but it was the crack, and I knew the dam was about to break. The next morning, the courthouse hallway was humming like a wire strung too tight. Jack sat beside me in the same blue tie he wore the day Haley was born. I noticed that detail even through the static in my brain. Ellen paced nearby, murmuring last-minute notes to herself. This was it. The judge entered, files stacked before him like stone slabs. He didn't look up as the courtroom settled. No drama, just the sound of law grinding into motion. "I've reviewed the new testimony and documentation," he began. "What we have is deeply troubling." He glanced up, eyes sharp now. "This court does not tolerate manipulation of due process, especially where a minor is concerned." My fingers dug into the edge of the bench. My mother sat 2 rows ahead, her hands neatly folded in her lap, face unreadable. My father looked at the floor. Deborah wasn't here. Maybe she couldn't face it. Maybe she'd done all the damage she could. The judge continued. There is clear evidence of fabricated testimony, collusion to mislead both this court and child services, and willful suppression of exculpatory material. He looked toward my parents. This is not just a family dispute. It is a violation of ethical and legal standards. Jack's hand brushed mine. I didn't dare breathe. Effective immediately, custody of Haley Grayson is restored to her mother, Claire Grayson. The words didn't register at first. Not really. I blinked. Jack squeezed my hand. Ellen released a slow breath. But, the judge continued, this court will also be referring Linda and Richard Easton to the district attorney's office for possible charges of perjury, obstruction of justice, and endangerment of a minor. A bailiff stepped forward, and for the first time in my life I saw my mother's face crack. Her mouth parted, eyes wide. This is absurd, she whispered, but the judge wasn't done. Given the gravity of this case, I'm issuing a protective order preventing either party from contacting the minor without court approval. This ruling is final pending review. My mother stood slowly, like she might faint, but the bailiff gently took her by the arm. My father followed in quiet disbelief, like a man whose world had been rewritten without permission. They didn't look back. Jack turned to me. It's over. No, I whispered, tears finally breaking free. It's right. They brought Haley out from a waiting room the court used for minors during sensitive hearings. She didn't smile at first. She didn't run. She just stood in the doorway, wide-eyed, unsure. It's real, I said softly. It's over. You're coming home. Her lip trembled. They said it wouldn't happen. They were wrong. Then she ran, straight into my arms, just like the little girl who once scraped her knee on a tricycle and cried until I kissed it better. She sobbed into my coat. I held her as tight as I could, letting every broken piece of me thread itself back together in her arms. We won, Mom, she whispered. We really won. We did, I said, because you never stopped being brave. Jack stood quietly a few feet away, giving us space. When Haley finally pulled back and saw him, her tears stilled. You helped, he nodded. Of course I did. She walked to him slowly, uncertain, then hugged him with one arm. It wasn't perfect, but it was beginning again. Outside the courthouse, the sun broke through the clouds like the universe was exhaling. Ellen handed me a folder. This is for your records and Claire. Yes, you fought harder than most people ever would. You didn't just win a case, you saved your daughter. I held the folder to my chest. No, we did, she smiled. Now go be a mom. I'll send the paperwork tomorrow. We watched Jack and Haley walk ahead of us, talking about music of all things. I don't know what happens next, I admitted. You don't have to, Ellen said. Just enjoy this moment. I did. For the first time in months, I let myself believe the nightmare was over. And that maybe, just maybe, our life could begin again on our own terms. The house felt different. It wasn't bigger or brighter, but something in it had softened. Like all the tension that had once clung to the corners had finally exhaled. Haley was home. She wandered the kitchen barefoot, a paintbrush in one hand and a cup of tea in the other. She'd taken over the dining table again, this time with watercolors. No court documents, no evidence folders, just color, freedom, and silence filled with something good. It had been 3 weeks since the final ruling. 3 weeks of therapy sessions, check-ins, and awkward but slowly warming conversations between her and Jack. 3 weeks of breathing again. I made scrambled eggs while Jack scrolled through the news on his phone, still in sweatpants. We'd fallen into a rhythm, not the tense, fragmented one we'd known during our marriage, but something newer, kinder. Sometimes we bumped shoulders in the hallway and didn't flinch. Sometimes we touched the same coffee mug and shared a smile. And sometimes, like this morning, we just existed quietly beside each other and it felt like peace. You working today? I asked. He nodded. Client meeting at 10, video call. Still doing freelance ops consulting. Until I figure out what's next. He looked at me like he was about to ask a bigger question, but didn't. Haley walked over, holding her newest painting. A tree with a swing, but this time the branches were full of pink blossoms. Soft, hopeful. You think it's too much? She asked, holding it up. I took a breath. No, it's exactly right. She smiled, shy but real. Then she kissed my cheek and went back to her project. Jack leaned close. She's sleeping better. She's talking more, I added. Even joked yesterday about oatmeal. He smiled. She's coming back. No, I said. She never left. We just had to find her again. I poured coffee, feeling the hum of something that felt dangerously close to happiness. You ever think about what this would have been like if we'd figured things out earlier? Jack asked. I looked at him, really looked. Yeah, but maybe we needed to fall apart to understand how to hold each other up. He didn't speak, just nodded. And then, quietly, he reached out and took my hand across the table. There was no grand kiss, no music swelling, just warm fingers, and a moment suspended between what was and what could still be. And that felt like enough. A year later, the wind was warm and the sky the color of faded denim. We stood in the middle of the community park, paper plates balanced in hand, barbecue smoke curling around us like a memory we didn't mind breathing in. Kids darted between picnic tables and folding chairs. Someone was playing guitar near the gazebo, a slightly off-key version of Sweet Caroline that somehow worked anyway. Haley was laughing. She wore cut-off jeans and a paint-streaked t-shirt, flipping burgers beside Jack like they'd done it 100 times. She nudged him with her elbow. He pretended to fumble the spatula. It was silly, and it was perfect. I sat under the oak tree at the edge of the lot, watching it all with a paper cup of lemonade and the kind of ache that only comes when you've earned your joy. Remember when all we had was fear, Haley said as she approached, carrying a tray of watermelon slices. She sat beside me and kicked off her sandals. I remember, I said. We watched Jack laughing with 2 other dads near the grill. Someone handed him a beer. He waved it off and reached for a ginger ale instead. Haley looked at me, serious now. I still have nightmares sometimes. I do too, I admitted. But they're different, she added. Less sharp, more like echoes. I nodded. I don't hate Grandma, she said. Not really, I just don't believe in her anymore. You don't have to, I said gently. Belief is something you give to people who protect it. She smiled faintly. You protected me. I reached over and tucked a loose curl behind her ear. You protected yourself too. She leaned against my shoulder. I'm glad we're us again. We never stopped being us. Jack wandered over a few minutes later, 2 plates in hand, one with extra pickles just the way I liked. He handed it to me without a word. We sat in a triangle, legs crossed, plates balanced, watching the kids kick a soccer ball on the grass. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. But it was ours. A new beginning stitched together from every broken thread we thought we'd lost. And somehow it held. As the sun started to set, casting that soft, golden light that makes everything look a little more like a movie, Haley grabbed her sketch pad from the picnic table. She began drawing. I leaned over. What's it going to be? A swing, she said. Under a tree, I smiled. Because now, finally, we could draw from a place of peace. And nothing, not even the past, could take that from us again.